A TNT original.
Flying ground attack fighters is less glamorous than air combat, but more dangerous.
It was personal. Strafing a truck, bombing a railroad yard, trying to bomb a bridge. Very personal. You were right in the front line. Down to earth, we called it. Tremendous satisfaction in blowing up a goods wagon, to sinking a barge full of petrol, strafing an airfield. All highly dangerous, but there's a certain satisfaction in destroying something. War's not supposed to be fun, but if you can imagine seeing a railroad train going down the track and there's a steam engine out in front just dying to be shot. And when you shoot it, a great cloud of steam comes out the sides and up through the smokestack. The train shudders to a halt. Oh, you're filled with joy.
Fighter bombers like the Typhoon and Thunderbolt added a fresh horror to war's grim catalog, destroying the enemy whenever he tried to move in daylight. By 1944, the German armies were in retreat. Their airfields lost in the Allied advances or destroyed by the onslaught from the air, the Luftwaffe operated from forest clearings or highways. The losses were colossal. Over 500 aircraft a week. Starved of fuel, short of trained pilots, they flung everything they had into the air to check the Allied offensive. New aircraft were developed in the search for a wonder weapon that could turn the tide. Most formidable of all these pioneering achievements was the Messerschmitt 262. It was the world's first jet fighter to see action, but came too late to save the Luftwaffe. By 1944, the British had their own jet fighter, the Gloster Meteor, though it was never used against enemy aircraft. The arrival of these two jets in the European skies swept in a new era of flight. Six years later, in the Korean War, jet fighters did clash in air combat. Many of the American pilots were veterans of World War II, well-trained and battle-hardened. Their principal weapon was the newly introduced F-86 Sabre. In it, they achieved almost undisputed dominance of the skies over Korea. By the end of the war, Sabres had claimed nearly 800 enemy aircraft destroyed for the loss of 78 of their own.
The transition from piston-driven, propeller-driven aircraft to jet-propelled aircraft was not as traumatic a change as one might imagine. Flying at altitude to conserve fuel was a change. The speeds weren't all that violent, because speed is relative. If he's going 600, you're going 600, what's the difference? Zero. I was in the first fighter group that had the first 35 production models of the F-86A-1. We wrecked over 20 of them. It wasn't all our fault. They just weren't built well. There was a new step forward. Pieces kept flying off. Engines quit. Tails would go fluttering. It was really a wild ride. It was very seldom that you took off without landing under emergency conditions.
The opposition was principally the Chinese, with some Soviet volunteers. The communist pilots were no match in skill and experience for their American and Allied opponents. But their aircraft, the Soviet-built MiG-15, was a revelation. An excellent fighter powered, ironically, by an engine based on a Rolls-Royce design. It outperformed all the American fighters except the Sabre, and in some features was superior to that as well. Its appearance sent a shockwave through the West. The scene was set for history's first jet fighter combats.
The 86 was a good dogfight machine. It was like a P-51, but it was much faster. Good visibility, rugged, reliable. The later models didn't fly apart. The time span between the two wars was not great enough for us to have lost the knowledge that had been gained.
The Russians, like America and her allies, used Korea as a proving ground where their pilots could gain experience of the new shape of aerial warfare. The use of air power in Korea stimulated a highly comprehensive program of technical innovation and aircraft development between the superpowers. The MiG-15 jet fighter fathered a whole family of MiGs, each one more sophisticated